Common Knowledge is brought to you by our friends at Game Grid Midvale, our local game store who puts players first with weekly competitive events, below market pricing, and the best customer service available. Check out their online inventory using the link in our description.
We are also sponsored by inkgaming.com. Use coupon code CCMTG10 at checkout for a 10% discount on all inked gaming supplies and accessories. You can support the show directly through Patreon at patreon.com/common knowledge.
This is the Common Knowledge Podcast. It's not about the cost, it's about the knowledge. Here are your hosts, Brandon Clark and Lawbert.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode 95 of the Common Knowledge Podcast. I am your host, Brandon, and I am joined once again by Sean the Lawbert.
Hey, Brandon.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Well, elephant in the room. This is the last podcast, the last of Common Knowledge.
I feel like it's kind of weird that, that was the most generic opening we've ever done because we both don't know how to act. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, kind of. It's a weird feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we should just jump right into it. We don't have, email or anything. What's the point,
Yeah, there's no card of the week. Nothing. Really what we're doing here is we're just trying to put together a really quick show where we kind of talk about what's going on and explain to our listeners why we've made this decision. We don't just want to leave you all just hanging out to dry. We want to give a good explanation for why we made this decision and why both Sean and I feel that it's an appropriate decision.
Right. I think I'll just start with myself. I had been going really hard for a really long time, and to put everything into just a nutshell, I'm tired. The podcast for me was at least 10 hours of work a week, sometimes much more, sometimes less, but most of the time it was more. And doing that in addition to a full-time job, the only way I feel like a person can do something like that is passion, and apparently that's a finite resource. It felt like it just dried up as I couldn't play Magic as much as I wanted to. Doing this 10 hours of my free time every week, my situation changed. I got a girlfriend really close to the start of this show, and I mean, this didn't really play into it, but I did get engaged over the weekend, so that's that's really exciting for me. I guess that just goes with I have been wanting to spend more time with my now fiance, and spending my Saturdays or whatever doing this, carving out a piece of time where I'm going to go and sit in a room and edit or show prep. That it got old after a while, and I didn't feel so passionate about the podcast as I used to. And we did record a different episode 95, but I'll just say I ruined it. It went so badly just because I did not feel good about anything.
Well, we both did our part on that one. It was not a good show. You could definitely tell that we were not in it, and I think we had even come off of skipping a week, and then it was we barely found time to get down together to do that show 95, and I was scrambling. It was a power ranking, so I was scrambling to get all the power rankings data together because I don't have a lot of free time anymore. And then it just felt super rushed. None of us were really enthusiastic about the format at the moment. It kind of just came Tron, all the points, Tron, burr. And it just wasn't something that we felt like we wanted to put out in the world with our stamp of approval on. was not the quality of show that we would ever want to put into the world. And so we didn't. And we both, after the show, just sat down and talked like, wow, that did not go well. We have not been liking the way our shows have been. We felt like our quality has been dropping recently. And I mean, this is why we have other responsibilities. We have other aspirations, other things that we're wanting to do in life. And unfortunately, wanting to devote time to those other things means that time has to be taken away from something. And for both of us, that was the podcast. And neither of us felt right continuing to do the podcast and to put out what we felt was mediocre content that our heart was not in. Like, that's just not fair to all of our listeners, because really, I think that's why we were doing this in the first place. It started out as like, oh, this is a fun thing that me and Sean can do together, because Sean and I have been, very good friends for years and years. We've worked together on all sorts of things. But then I think it slowly turned into, wow, there's actually a community behind this. And it's so amazing to see all the engagement from those community members. And we just didn't feel like what we were doing was deserving of that community. And a lot of it just came down to the fact that our lives are pushing us in different directions, more away from Magic. I know for me, Magic's always going to be a hobby. And it was bigger in my past. For me, it was always something like I wanted to be on the Pro Tour and all this. And then I got married and we had our first child. And I realized I have to give that up. I can't strive to compete on a Pro Tour anymore. I can't. With my wife, with my kid, working, all those things, that's what I need to give up. And that's where I picked up Pauper. And Magic became more of a hobby, right? And then I picked up this podcast and it started to become a bigger part of my life. It was something like, I was dedicating an entire evening to sitting down and recording, trying to help write show notes, doing all those things. And then I started school. And I know Sean knows how hard school has been on me. For me, it's a matter of priorities. And my priorities are my family, my school, finishing school, getting my degree, and my work and being successful at work. And unfortunately, that means that I need to take away devotion and time and energy from the podcast, which means the podcast suffers, which again, I feel guilty about because Sean's putting all this work into it and I feel like I'm just half-assing it. And then you listeners aren't getting the content, the quality that you expect or want. And it just compounds,
Right.
Just compounds.
It didn't help that you were the more competitive one when we started, and that did taper off, especially when you started school. And I was never competitive. I was like, I'll show up to events and I love brewing. Like, I want to make my brews to a competitive level. And like, that's what I loved. But like, doing well in like a big tournament has been like a side thing to that. Like, when Brandon and I first were working at Little Caesars together and we like had goals, one of mine was like, I want to make a deck that people top 8 with a GP or something like that with a deck that I have. Like, I want people to know the name of my deck that I made. And I did that with Corrupt Control. Like, I feel like a lot of people know what that deck is. It's like, it is derivative of like, yeah, it's a bunch of black cards, but I made it and I thought I accomplished that. And then I wanted to be like a host for a show. And I was debating whether or not I would say this, but part of the reason I can't keep putting all of my energy into this is that no matter how good it is, no matter how perfect and what percentage of the Pauper community listens, there's a ceiling on this because it's so incredibly niche. There's the circle of the Magic community and then the even smaller circle of like people in the Magic community who listen to podcasts, and then like this tiny circle of people who play Pauper and listen to podcasts. and it's even subdivided into like, and just our podcast, that number can never grow large enough that it's your job. And honestly, I love making content so much that I'm not going to give up on that dream. And someday I will make content again. I've thought about doing a Dungeons and Dragons show. I think the chances of me at least doing another Magic show is pretty slim, just because I feel like I've done it, I've tried my hand on it, and wasn't quite satisfied, but that doesn't mean I'm ever going to give up Magic, and I fully intend to keep making YouTube videos, like keep making Pauper content, just in a different capacity. But it's something like making Pauper content is really something that that has to be fueled by passion, and like I said, I ran out.
Yeah, and my passion has kind of gone in a different direction. When I first started the show, I had just a regular 9 to 5 where it was really just a job, and Magic was my passion. And so, I'd just go to work, do my job, and while I was at work, I could be thinking about Magic, listening to Magic podcasts, sitting at my desk, pretending to be doing spreadsheets or whatever they're having me do, and instead I'm like thinking about deck lists and whatever. And that was really suitable for the show because I could come home and erase my mind of everything from work and then focus on the show and playing Magic and all this other stuff. And now that I think I found my career, so to say. This is what I want to do. It's what I'm good at. It's what I'm passionate about. Cooking, that is. And that consumes 90% of what I think about in a day. Even when I'm not at work, I'm reading recipe books. Sean thinks it's funny because I'll get a new recipe book and I'll show him through the camera. I'll be like, look at this new recipe book I got. And Sean's like, I don't get it. It's a recipe book. And I'm like super excited about it. So I read recipe books and I watch videos on YouTube. And at this point, I would say that the majority of the content that I consume through articles or YouTube or whatever, at least 80% of it is cooking related. And then there's all the other stuff that I watch. And then within that, there's Magic.
Way earlier in the podcast, like, it really was, I would wake up and I'd be thinking about Magic, and I would fall asleep thinking about Magic. And every time I could get on my phone, I was looking at Magic stuff, and just slowly changed to other things. Like, I think that's natural for a person, and even people who really love Magic or love a format, I feel like it's natural for a person to take breaks and try out other things. But doing a podcast where it's supposed to be competitive, that kind of demands like 100% all the time. Even when we weren't doing competitive topics, like, I felt like during the week, if I wasn't playing to gather data, then it wasn't worth my time because I only had so much time to devote to playing Magic, and that sucked all the fun out.
Yep. I had very similar experience with that too, of feeling like I need to be playing decks that are, good, or decks that are relevant to the show, which some worked out a lot for me because, I liked playing Skred Delver. I enjoyed the blue-black deck a little bit, not as much. I love that Jeskai deck. Ephemerate, Astrolabes. I could have played that format forever. I get why other people didn't want to, but but like right now it's really tough for me because the best deck in the format is Tron, and that is something I will never play. Ever. Never, ever, ever gonna play Tron. It's not fun to play against, it doesn't look fun to play with. Like, that is not the kind of Magic that I ever want to play. So right now I'm just kinda like, I don't know, I play Burn sometimes. I'm playing like these mediocre Delver decks and just feeling like I'm getting kind of stomped on all the time. And it has gotten to the point where it's like, well, I don't really want to be playing Pauper right now. I don't like the state of the format currently. I'd rather be playing EDH or like building a Legacy deck online, playing Legacy, because that format's sweet right now. Instead, I feel like I have to play Pauper with the little time that I have to play. I have to play Pauper because I have responsibility to the podcast. And that just pulled the fun out of Magic, and it pulled the fun out of Pauper, because it kind of feels like it just left a bad taste in my mouth. And hopefully it's not going to be a big problem. And, when the format changes and shifts again in the future, I can come back to it and it's going to be great. And I'm going to love it like I used to.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. It's still something that I love. There's so much stuff about it, like not selling a single card here. Like, don't get me wrong. I fully intend to play so much more Magic. So much more than I have been for 2 years. And I just need a break. And I think you need a break. And we want to love it again. Like that, I feel like that's what we're trying to get back, is the love for it. And I think that's, most of our listeners are going to be happy with that. So as far as what's next, if you want to be a host on, heck, if somebody wanted it, I would give them Common Knowledge, as long as Spencer was also all right with it. But I think most people are going to want to start their own. But Spencer is looking for more hosts to start a new competitive Pauper podcast. If you want to email Spencer Howland at gmail.com, Spencer is spelled normally, and then Howland is Howland. Email him, say that you're interested. If you have a Magic resume, send him your Magic resume. I'm not kidding. Like, if you have experience, put that on a piece of paper. Anyway, anything else before it's bye forever?
Yeah, just one last time, want to say thank you to all the amazing listeners, and especially thank you to all our amazing patrons who have supported us over this 2-year span. It's incredible to me that anyone out there even cared even a small amount enough to listen to the show, let alone to support it. That was just so absolutely amazing to me. And the Common Knowledge Facebook page is not going to go away. We're going to still keep that going, because we've already got just such an awesome group of people there talking about the format. So again, if you're not part of that yet, go there and you'll still be able to interact with Sean and I and all the other great listeners there, as well as you can go to the Discord group for constructed criticism, and we'll be in the Pauper section from time to time. So those are some places where you could reach us if you wanted to. And just again, such a big thank you to the listeners. You guys were the reason this went as long as it even did.
Yeah, I did want to make sure that I didn't make anybody think that if you supported us more, we would have stayed or anything like that. It had nothing to do with that. Like, our community was overwhelmingly positive. I don't think we ever really even got negative feedback until right at the end, where I posted it on Reddit, and it was constructive. It really was. The people were trying to be constructive. So we never had anybody send us anything hateful, or it was an amazing experience. You agree?
I agree. Goodbye forever.
Goodbye forever.
End time.